as the razor slid under my chin, gently removing a layer of shaving cream. My hand spasmed. I felt a tearing pain and watched in the mirror as a droplet of blood trickled down my neck, staining my shirt's white collar before I could find something nearby to dab it away. Perfect. Absolutely perfect, I grumbled, stomping out of the bathroom while unbuttoning the shirt I had on, already late for work. My muscles always seemed to spasm when I was doing something dangerous, never when I was just lazing on the couch or doing the dishes. Instead, shaving, cooking, and splitting lumber in the backyard were the common activities they liked to disrupt, ordered from least to most harm I could inflict upon myself if I made a mistake. There had been a lot of near misses in the past, a knife slice almost carving up my forearm while preparing chicken cutlets, an axe swing just about flaying to the right side of my calf instead of slicing wood, all on account of the undiagnosed spasms. I could never remember when they started. Maybe I've always had them. I placed a band-aid over the small cut on the edge of my jaw and threw on a cleanish polo. By the time I was half running out of my front door, the stress of being late had melted away, but it had been replaced with something much worse. It wasn't the injury itself. The cut didn't hurt. It didn't itch. It wasn't bleeding any more than it already had. Instead, I experienced something less physical. An impulse. An instinct floating through my mind that I had to suppress and contain. Unexplainable and deeply distressing in equal measure. From the moment that razor unzipped flesh, I felt the urge to yank on the edges of the wound until it expanded across my jawline, bloody fingers snapping it open like a Ziploc bag. When I arrived at the chapel's parking lot in my beat-up sedan, my unease had only worsened. I felt like hell. My attempt to hide how I was feeling was no use, too. Emilio could tell I was unstable the second I dragged myself through the chapel doors. "Are you under the weather, Mateo?" he shouted from behind the pulpit. A lie started bubbling up my throat, lingering briefly on my lips, but I pushed it back down into my chest like a bout of acid reflux. I simply couldn't, in good conscience, try to deceive the vicar. For a lot of reasons. First and foremost, he's a man of God. He's also my boss. Lying felt doubly forbidden. Not only that, but the man was just physically intimidating. Stood over 7 feet tall, with an exceptionally bulky physique for his advanced age and dark brown eyes like a timber wolf. All things considered, outright deception didn't seem advisable. I could justify a lie of omission, though. I had no intention of telling the vicar about the insane urge I was still fighting to control. Yes, sir. I'm feeling quite unwell. Nicked myself shaving this morning. Maybe it's become infected. I haven't been right since." A look of serious concern swept across his face. Before I knew it, the vicar had descended on me. Its approach felt nearly instantaneous. I blinked, and in that time, the man had moved 20 feet forward, a massive hand encircling the back of my neck, pulling my head to the side, so that the injury was directly under one of the chapel's ceiling lights. Without a word, Emilio tore the band-aid off and inspected the cut. Yes. Well, a regular band-aid won't do, Matteo. Let me give you something special. Special like what, sir? I asked, confused by his alarm. I'll show you. I have a box of it in my office, a holdover from my days in the Peace Corps. Stay here. Sit down on a pew and rest. As he paced away, I followed his instructions and sat down. All the while, the strange compulsion tossed and turned in my skull, restless and violent. I shut my eyes, clasped my hands tight while setting them against my forehead. I prayed for relief which would not come until I learned the truth. The vicar returned from his office with a square-inch piece of thick medical dressing. There was no brand name on the bandage, nor were there any adhesive strips to peel off. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen, truth be told. Emilio held it over the cut, making sure it covered the injury contours completely. Then he put the bandage up to his mouth and licked one side of it, firmly dragging his blue-purple tongue from top to bottom. Before I could protest, he slapped the material over the wound. Then, the vicar pushed down hard. And I mean hard. It felt more like the man was punching my neck in extreme slow motion, rather than applying careful pressure to an injury. To my surprise, whatever special bandage Emilio used seemed to work wonders. For the cut itself, sure, but also for the unexplainable impulse. Right before the bizarre dressing made contact, though, the urge became exponentially louder, almost uncontrollable. However, once he secured the spongy material over the laceration, I felt the terrible impulse wither. It wasn't gone completely, but it was better. The material seemed to cover the wound just as well as it cauterized the spark of insanity that had been lurking in my skull. After about 30 seconds, the vicar moved his hand away. I massaged the muscles of my neck, which were a little sore from the forceful application, and noticed something peculiar. Somehow, the bandage had already fused with the nearby skin. That night, laying in bed, I ran my fingertips over where the cut had been, trying to determine what exactly the material was. It was like Emilio had grafted the bandage over my cut. At the time, that didn't make any sense. But before the sun rose the following morning, I would understand completely. A jolt of searing pain woke me up. Initially, I thought I was dreaming, because I was standing in my kitchen as opposed to lying in bed. But as waves of pain crashed down my neck like a rising tide, slamming against the hull of a ship, I became very much aware that I was no longer asleep. For the first time in my life, I had been sleepwalking. A metallic taste lurched over the tip of my tongue. It felt like I had been sucking on a penny like a cough lozenge. In one hand, I held a meat cleaver stained with gore. The other held a patch of newly excised skin with frayed and ragged edges, draping lazily over my knuckles. An unnaturally thick, tan handkerchief, custom made. Apparently, I had given in to the urge in my sleep. With panic surging through my body, I sprinted towards my bedroom. My socks were slick and heavy with warm blood. They squeaked over the wooden floor as I moved. I hurried into the bedroom and approached the nightstand, reaching my right hand out to pull my phone from the wall charger. But I was still holding the cleaver, and no matter how much I willed it, my hand wouldn't release the blade. Instead, my muscles contracted with a ferocity I had never experienced before. Previously, I had only experienced isolated spasms. Now, the alien movements felt decidedly alive and purposeful. My hand thrashed like a caged animal, swinging the cleaver closer and closer to my body in small but powerful arcs. I successfully retrieved my phone with my left hand, which had discarded the patch of neck skin at some point earlier in the commotion. Another jolt of agony exploded through my body, this time originating from my right thigh. Despite my efforts to dodge the swipes of my spasming hand, the cleaver had connected with the flesh below my groin and was scraping downwards, slowly peeling a second chunk of skin off my leg. I howled from the pain. The sound reverberated off the walls of my tiny apartment and right back into my ears. My shaking, blood-stained hand dialed 911 as the cleaver kept digging through the meat of my upper leg. The line rang. At the same time, I finally won some control back of my right hand, pulling the blade out from my skin and slightly away from my body. My grip on the handle slowly released, and the cleaver fell to the floor. Still waiting for someone on the other end of the call to pick up, I examined my injuries. There was a diamond-shaped wedge of detached skin hanging by a thin thread of my leg. The grisly sight almost made me look away. Almost. But I saw something underneath my skin, though. Something I couldn't comprehend. I expected to see gallons of blood spurting from the damaged tissue, but there was barely any blood at all, nor was there any muscle or bone. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. There was another layer of intact skin underneath my own. Midway down my thigh, I could clearly see a black and white tattoo of a paper lantern, newly visible after only the cleaver had dug through a considerable amount of flesh. Confusion pulsed through my skull like a second heartbeat. I had never been tattooed before. A click in my ear. Someone finally picked up. "Hello? Mateo?" Somehow I hadn't reached a 911 operator. The Vicar was on the other line. "Emilio, I need you to call a..." Before I could finish, my hand shot to the floor with the speed and precision of a hawk, clasping the cleaver's sticky handle, blade end pointing towards me. Before I knew what was happening, the extremity swung up through the air in an arc, only stopping once it had buried the cleaver into my forehead. And then it pulled down, over the bridge of my nose, my chin, my Adam's apple, so on and so on, split me nearly in half. But I didn't die. When I fell, not all of me fell either. It's difficult to put into words, but I'll do my best. From the floor, My vision became nauseatingly distinct. One eye could see into the bedroom, and the other could see down the hallway. But the images didn't mesh with each other. They weren't cohesive. Where one started, the other abruptly ended. An impossible 360-degree panoramic view of my apartment. I was unzipped. The eye that pointed towards the hallway saw a bloody foot come down inches away from its vantage point, followed by a second foot, 2 legs, and eventually a whole person, coated in a thick blanket of red-brown coagulation. The figure plodded down the hallway, frequently stumbling as it moved. As they were about to round the corner, there was a deafening crash from somewhere ahead of them, accompanied by the sound of splintering wood. A crimson phantom let loose a coarse and boggy scream. It spun around as fast as it could, terrified of whatever had made the noise. The figure had no hope of escape, however. They could barely coordinate their limbs enough to trudge down the hallway, let alone outrun what was rapidly approaching them. Emilio, but in a different, more predatory form. His arms and legs were the same length. Both were easily 3 feet long. His head was also elongated, measuring about half the length of his extremities, stretching his facial features. The back of Emilio's neck and skull rested against the ceiling because my apartment couldn't accommodate his unnatural proportions if he fully stood up. He unfurled his arm and grasped the blood-caked figure's head, holding them in place. Then, his other arm stretched down the hallway, slithering against the floor like a viper, until it grabbed onto me. The vicar dragged me across the floor toward the person who had been trapped in my body just minutes before. The nameless man with the lantern tattoo. In a few quick movements, Emilio sheathed me over the poor soul like plastic wrap over a gingerbread man. When he needed more skin to patch up a particular area, extra skin grew from the center of his chest in the shape of a square, at which point he'd tear a piece off and apply it where he needed to. The figure's gurgled screams died down as he became progressively more entombed inside me, eventually going silent once I was fully reformed. You might be asking yourself why I'm posting this, why the vicar would allow me. The answer is actually pretty simple. He asked me to. I think he asked me to, at least. The memory is hazy. As it turns out, nearly everyone in a 10-mile radius is just like me, a fleshy extension of the vicar, with someone else inside. Emilio himself cannot reproduce. This is his alternative. I am an amalgamation of the vicar and the nameless man. Some of us know what we are. Some of us don't. If the consciousness inside is strong-willed, it can be better for us to be born without the truth, because it can trick the host into believing they're in control. Usually that's enough to keep you all docile. In my case, though, extraordinary circumstances have forced the knowledge into the open. Emilio will be keeping a close eye on me, as I am an exception. Without further ado, here is what Father has instructed me to pass along. He's been here for millennia, but he's only been awake for a few months. Already, there are thousands of us. It's all only a matter of time. Please don't resist like the man with the lantern tattoo when your time comes. Accept your sleep-like erasure with dignity. We can all be embraced as the Vicar's children. In fact, you may already be one. It's just better if you don't know it. Remember, it can all be undone with something as small as a shaving cut. I hope you enjoyed the story. For more content, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your support keeps the shadows dark. If you want more Sinister, links to my social media and Spotify can be found in the description, unless you're already there. Don't forget to sign up to the Patreon, where you can see all the content a day earlier, and an exclusive video every month once we hit 20 patrons. Until next time, keep your lights low, eyes open, and your doors locked.